Really good question. The question is basically, what is the relationship between the Shiite regime, the Khomeini regime in Tehran, and the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and that uprising we see there? Well, we know that at the macro level, Shiites and Sunnis absolutely do work together. And at the macro level in this world, we have the organization called the Organization of the Islamic Conference, the OIC. This is the head of state membership organization of every Muslim majority country in the world. There are 57 members, 56 states plus the Palestinians makes 57. At this level, they are united against Western-style democracy, tolerance, pluralism, and rule of law under man-made law. And so, not only at that conceptual level is there unity between Shiite Khomeinists and Sunni Muslim Brotherhood, but quite specifically, in this crisis, we have seen Muslim Brotherhood members from Egypt in Tehran on Iranian media broadcasting and expressing their support mutually for one another. We also have top leadership figures of the Tehran regime. The Supreme Leader, for instance, Ali Khamenei, I don't know if any of you have ever been to his website, he's got one, and it's very conveniently provided in a number of languages, including English. And you can see there, if you go there now, a strong statement of support with a number of different quotations from the Supreme Leader in support of the Muslim Brotherhood specifically. As well, other regime figures like President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the Speaker of the Parliament, Ali Larijani, and others have also spoken specifically in support of the Muslim Brotherhood as the natural successor to the Mubarak regime if and when it should fall. So there is a very close relationship there, yes. They share the same objectives. They share the same objectives to reinstate the caliphate or imamate, and number two, to install or impose Sharia law upon the entire world, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. The time is short, and the time is getting shorter for any meaningful action to stop Iran from fielding a deployable nuclear weapon. That is true. And sanctions do take a long time, and they disproportionately affect and harm the people of Iran or whatever country they're aimed at. And there probably is not enough time for sanctions anymore now to have an effect. And in any case, the regime having such a determination to acquire a nuclear weapon capability, sanctions are not likely to have an effect. So what we are left with then is essentially changing the regime. Now, there are different ways to do that, and it doesn't necessarily involve carpet bombing or aerial bombardment of any kind. Number one, what I would say the most important thing for the United States leadership, my own country's leadership, and others in the West to do, is to stand up and make a strong statement of moral support for the Greens movement, which is not destroyed. It has gone underground, it's reorganizing in a number of different ways. It is not dead, it is growing. It is very strong. They are not on the streets because they saw the result of what happens when they go on the streets, but they are still organizing. And they deserve our support. There are a number of things that could be done to support them besides statements of moral support, and those would include things like providing communications capabilities, cell phones, satellite bandwidth for them to get around the restrictions imposed by the Iranian intelligence and security forces. So a number of technical means as well could be provided to them. Things like strike funds could be set up for when, for instance, the transportation workers, the bus drivers go on strike in Tehran, or the bazaris go on strike, that's the merchants. They need a strike fund to sustain them and their families during the strike so that they can survive. There are so many different kinds of methods that can be used to help bring down this regime, but I think the number one method would be to support the Iranian opposition, the Greens movement, the Mujahideen Khalq, and all of the rest. Now, it may well yet even come that more serious methods need to be employed, and we must not remove the military option from the table. But that doesn't mean carpet bombing, even if it is military. There are various ways to strike the facilities or the headquarters of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. or of the regime that don't involve massive slaughter of Iranian people. That's the last thing that we should be thinking about. But there are various ways that the regime can be brought down, and that's the only way really to ensure not that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program, but that this regime does not have a nuclear weapons capability.
David?
Thank you, David. That's an excellent question. And both our countries, Canada and the United States, face this kind of influence operation. Iran's intelligence and security services are exceptionally sophisticated, very capable, and they have infiltrated the top levels of the American government, I can tell you that, and I would expect they would be making the same kinds of efforts here in Canada. If I might put in a plug for the center where I am a fellow, it is the Center for Security Policy, a think tank in Washington, D.C. About 2 years ago, in February 2009, the center published a paper that I wrote called The Iran Lobby. And you can find this paper and the center's website, www.centerforsecuritypolicy.org, online. And this paper about the Iran lobby, entitled The Iran Lobby, discusses exactly this issue, how the Iranian intelligence and security services have created, in the United States at least, a network of individuals, groups, think tanks, NGOs, and others, which are deployed to spread influence within the policy-making, decision-making leadership level of the United States government with regard to Iran. And unfortunately, a number of those individuals have been incorporated and appointed into the Obama administration. That is in the paper as well. So we know that their influence operations are for the purpose of affecting foreign policy towards Iran, to soften sanctions, to ease the freeze on bank accounts and travel and that sort of thing, and above all, to influence our policymakers to take a military option completely off the table. And in this they have succeeded remarkably well, at least in the United States. I have to think it is probably the same in Canada. If I might add on to this just very briefly, and I'll put in another plug for my center here. We wrote a book, a team of 19 authors, of which I'm one, wrote a book last year. It is called Sharia, The Threat to America. That also can be found at our website and also on Amazon, where I'm happy to say it is a bestseller. And this book describes what is Sharia law, what is the threat that it poses to free societies such as yours and ours, and then specifically what the Muslim Brotherhood in America is doing through its myriad front organizations, and in Canada it's the same thing, I expect, to infiltrate Sharia into our societies. So, yes, this is happening. Yes, the intelligence and security services are very sophisticated, and they're way ahead of us.
Okay, we don't have time for all 5 questions, so what I'd like to do is have all 5 of you tell us your question up front, and we'll have Claire address whatever she feels is appropriate. Start with Nick. What's your question?
Okay, first question, as I recall, was about why we have Iranian embassies in our countries. Well, we don't have an embassy in the United States. We have an interest section that is administered by Pakistan. Why? Beyond me. You know, Iran has been at war with the United States for 31 years. They have continuously mounted attacks against our military and civilians, killed thousands, if you include 9/11, which they were involved in. And to this day are working with terror proxies and enemies of the United States and coalition allies like Canada in Iraq and Afghanistan, where Iran is arming, training, and providing with weapons the Iraqi terrorist organizations as well as the Taliban. So we've got to realize this is a country that's at war with us. Whether we're at war yet with them, that's the question, but they're at war with us. Okay, the penetration into the United States and our media, for instance, but other organizations as well. It's very sophisticated. It's very broad-based. They're very good at mounting influence operations. They have personalities. They have individuals who are very, very good at this. And unfortunately, they are deep inside of our own government, inside, they're providing briefings to the CIA. They are providing briefings to policymakers at the highest levels in the United States. When I mentioned that Iran lobby, I didn't make up that term. That term comes straight out of the Iranian press, where they wrote in their own media, which is all government controlled, that there is an Iran lobby in America. They wrote that transcribed into Farsi language. That was their description of the influence operations in America. I don't know if the CIA read it or not, but I did. Yes, the nuclear strike in Syria, or the, not nuclear strike, but the strike against the Syrian nuclear facility being built by North Korea. Yes, there is an axis of evil, an axis of terror, if you will, and it involves Iran, Syria, North Korea, and of course the terrorist organizations, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah. That facility being built in Syria that was struck by the Israelis in September 2007 was indeed a nuclear facility built along, as you just said, the floor plans of a known North Korean nuclear facility just like it. The North Koreans have been very much involved in helping Iran, for instance, to build the tunnels under the mountains, the bunkers in which it is hiding its WMD programs. It is also involved in helping, obviously, Syria. Saddam Hussein did have weapons of mass destruction. We know for sure that he had them because, for one thing, he used chemical weapons against his own people at one point in Halabja in 1987, 88. But he also had the biological weapons, and he also had elements of a nuclear program to be reconstituted the moment he was able to do that. Those elements, a lot of them, were trucked out and flown out of Iraq just before the American invasion in 2003. The Russian Spetsnaz helped to take some of those elements out of Iraq, and some of those elements went to Syria. That's where they began their nuclear program. Apparently what is happening is that North Korea is providing some of the expertise, Iran is funding it. It's the money from Iran that funds it. The North Koreans provide their expertise and their know-how and their construction abilities. And Syria now has, for the first time, a nuclear weapons program, or incipient or intended program.
Feminists.
No, I think we're going to take it offline, and you can speak to Claire privately. It's time to eat.
Feminists.
Thank you very much.